Hey y'all, welcome to the My Place podcast. I'm your host, Mary McSwain. I'm joined as I normally am by my dad, Jay McSwain, but today on the podcast we have two very special guests with us today. And as I was thinking about it, I was trying to think of the best way to give them the proper introduction, but figured that they would do it best. So Randy and Charity, if y'all would just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Can we make some commentary after they introduce? We might introduce them better than they'll introduce themselves.
We might. We're going to give people the
They
full
may be
context.
too humble to introduce themselves the way we do.
We'll fill in whatever they leave
Okay.
out.
Okay, well, I'll start. I'm Charity Drury. This is my husband, Randy. And I'm a mom of 3, go to First Redeemer. Definitely love Jesus. And I think I spend most of my time finding ways to point people to what God has done in my life. And so I'm just very thankful and blessed for my family. So I think that's what I would probably say about me.
Yeah, and I'm Randy, Charity's husband, and let's see, we've been married. We should say that we've been married almost 27 years. This year will be 27.
Yeah.
As she said, we have 3 kids, and been going to First Redeemer for I think it's 23 years now.
Wow.
It's been a minute.
Wow.
Yeah. And we took place way back in, I think it was 2004 or 5. So it's been a while.
It's been a few years.
Yeah, it's been a few years.
We're getting old.
So I want to say to those that watch this, your real claim to fame is that my children are 22 and 24.
Mm-hmm.
Mary's 22 and the oldest is 24. And for years, they referred to Charity as Mary and Randy as Joseph.
Yep.
Because in the Christmas pageant that we've done every year for 6 years,
I know.
for many, many, many years, y'all have 4 children. And whatever kid came along, y'all would be Mary and Joseph and sing. And you had the real life baby that you just had to be little baby Jesus. So my kids thought that you were Mary and you were Joseph. So that's your real claim to fame.
That is
is my
claim to
children
fame.
looked at the
That
two
is
of you
funny.
as Mary and Joseph.
Yeah, my son said something similar when we were, I don't know, Mary and Joseph for a while. We probably did it for 10 years.
12, 15 years.
And we kind of aged out. But at some point, my son's, and he was, I don't know, 6 or 7 at the time. And he said, it was during a presidential election year. I don't remember the year. And we were watching the news and the different candidates on the news. Maybe it was the debate. And he said, Dad, why don't you run for president? And I said, well, that's nice. No, and of course, no, you need to be well known. You need to be kind of famous to do something like that and kind of have a little bit of a name recognition. And he goes, Dad, you are Joseph in the Christmas play. So, I mean, and he said it in just such a sweet, well, of course they know you're Joseph. So anyway, that's funny. It was part of our story for a little bit at church.
Mary, I'm sorry. You've got your notes there and I'm already off script, but I think you have some other questions to ask. Sorry, I kind of diverted us for a minute.
Well, we said that we would fill in whatever we had about what we know about y'all. And Dad, that is my next question is, how did you first get to know? Because I know you didn't only know them as Mary and Joseph. That is how I first remember y'all. But I know you knew them outside of being Mary and Joseph. So tell us about how you got to know them initially.
Well, what I'd like to do if I could, because I've heard their version and I just think it's really cool. I'll just say the long and short of it is I got to know them when they went through Place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we somewhat need to back up just a little bit and let Randy, Charity talk about how they learned about Place, because I think that's a cool story, even for a lot of people that are trying to figure out how God created them and maybe are tuning into this episode for the first time. They've never heard of spiritual gifts either. So Randy, let's back up. Y'all went through Place with me.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about your involvement with Place. And then obviously you're going to talk to Charity about her involvement in your life. So,
Yeah, so it was probably 20 years ago that we were at church at First Redeemer, and it was on a Sunday night, way back when we used to have Sunday night services. And the pastor, and leading up into this point, I had never heard anything about spiritual gifts. I grew up in a Baptist church.
one of the great churches in America.
And I'm sure they talked about it. I either missed that Sunday or I wasn't paying attention. I have no idea, but it never really resonated with me. And anyway, the pastor that Sunday night mentioned, it was Matthew 25 was the passage of scripture, which was the parable of the talents. And we know this story, but basically Jesus tells this story about a master who has these servants that are being entrusted with a sum of money, 5 talents, 2 talents, and 1 talent. The 5 and the 2, they doubled it. And the guy with 1 basically buried his talent and did nothing with the money that was entrusted to him. Sure enough, the master comes back and there's the reckoning, the day of reckoning. What did you do with what I gave you? And the guy that had 5 doubled it, the guy with 2 doubled it, and the guy with 1 said, I buried it. I did nothing with it. And the master said, you wicked servant. And the pastor sort of related all of this back to, we've all been entrusted with a certain amount of time, a certain amount of treasure, and what are you doing with, and also the gifts that you've been given, what have you been doing with what's been entrusted to you? And he related it back to spiritual gifts. And I'm sitting there, I look at Charity, and I'm like, because I'd been singing we've been singing kind of all our life. And I thought, I'm good. I sing, I'm serving, but I don't really know what spiritual gifts are. So I don't know, is that a gift or am I okay doing it? But I felt so convicted just sitting there listening. And I need to figure out what this is. And thankfully there was a punchline to the message where he said, well, there's this guy named Jay McSwain, and he'll be in the back of the service, or back of the in the foyer with a table about place, and you can sign up today if you want to learn about spiritual gifts. And I looked at Charity and I said, we're doing that. And as soon as he said amen, I turned around and I walked to the back, and I think I was the first to sign up, and that's when I met you and signed up for place.
19, 20 years ago.
Must have been 20 years ago. And I think the place class was the following Sunday. Yeah. And so we were there the next week, and that's where kind of everything started for us.
Yeah. Very cool. I'm going to say more about that, but.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Now, Charity, had you ever heard anything about spiritual gifts when you were sitting? Do you remember that sermon when y'all were sitting there?
I vaguely remember. I definitely remember taking the class. But we grew up together in high school and middle school. So we were at the same church. And I really didn't know. I really thought, I sing, I'm using my gift. I thought that's what it was. And so having that understanding and going through place, it just kind of put everything in perspective, and it made me realize there's so much more. And then I realized some areas that I'm strong in, and I'm like, that makes sense. And so when you figure that out, and then you're able to figure out where to go and get placed and actually use that gift in church or anywhere, it just really makes a difference. It brings joy and happiness that I just didn't realize. As a Christian, you don't realize if you're not using those gifts, they're wasted. It's just like that verse. And so I had no idea. But I don't really remember that Sunday, but I do remember taking the class. That was the one thing that stood out to me. It's a huge part of our lives, and we always tell people about how important it is. So, yeah.
So y'all heard the sermon. You remember it vaguely, but y'all both remember going to the class.
Yes.
You've signed up the next Sunday. You were sitting there with Dad teaching it. What are some of those things that you learned about yourself, whether it be your personality, your spiritual gifts, the things that really resonated that might have been new to you, that might have been surprising to you? What are some of those things that you remember learning?
Yeah, so I took the spiritual gift assessment, and teaching and evangelism kind of came up high on that. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I'd never really taught in church, anything. I'd done some stuff at work, kind of training and things like that. But I haven't really taught anything at church, but that's okay. I'm open, to this. And one of the things that we talk about in Place is explore opportunities and try different things out. And so I had my one-on-one consultation with Jay, and I after the class was over and after the 5-week session, and I was very passionate about the spiritual gift topic, and obviously you are as well. And you could tell that was just kind of emanating from me as I was so interested in this topic and wanting to learn more. And I was amazed at kind of this whole process that had taken place over the PLACE of those sessions. And I remember Jay saying, you ought to think about maybe teaching Place. I was like, wow, that's interesting. Is that something I could do? I mean, it was just kind of in its really early stages at that time, at least for me. And I was like, well, yeah. So how would that work? And well, you just co-teach with me, Jay said. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. I could do that. And one thing you said to me in our counseling or consultation session, I'm very, I need sort of my ability type is conventional. So I like the rules. I like the box. I like structure. And with teaching, I needed some structure. I needed and I'm a C personality, so I like things in order. And so I was like, well, but what do I do? I'm not sure how to teach this. And Jay says, I got something for you. And he goes and he pulls out of the drawer and he pulls out the leader guide. And it's the Place book for leaders. And he hands this to me and it's all laid out with the outline and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I feel this. I mean, this is perfect for somebody, a C personality with a conventional. So it was just it sort of set me up well for taking the next step of actually teaching. So, and you and I sort of co-taught for a bit.
Can I add a little bit to the story? So you have been teaching it 17, 18 years now at our church.
Yeah.
You'll teach it a couple of times during the year. And I'll never forget your youngest daughter of the 4 kids, who's one of my favorite people in all the world, because she makes me feel like I'm the most special person in the world. But she used to tell me all the time when I'd see her, and I've been knowing her, since she was probably
born, I'm sure.
Born. I mean, I've known her since she was born.
Yeah.
But she'd be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and she'd say to me, I always know when my daddy's teaching Place. He's got those videos up of you watching them with his book, preparing. So I always know when he's teaching. Now, here's the funny part of the whole thing. Every time I go through the spiritual gifts when I'm teaching them at the church, and I get to the gift of teaching, and I always say that person is very clear, very concise. They don't say things 4 times like I do. They don't have to use a 7.5-minute story to make something come alive like I do. And I'll say, and many of you, because you guys are very visible because you're on the worship team at church and people see y'all and a lot of people know you. And I'll say, some of you may even know Randy Drury. I said, he has the gift of teaching and he teaches Place several times during the year. And I'll say, sorry, I didn't tell you before you signed up to go through it with me, because I don't have the gift of teaching. Randy does. And if you want to redo it when he teaches it, go ahead. But I've watched, I don't know, I've probably sat in 25, 30 times in and out when you've been teaching through the years. And I am really amazed at how effective you are. We're a lot different in the way we teach it.
Yeah.
But you are so effective taking who you are and making it very clear and concise to be able to make it come alive for others. So
yeah, one thing you said to me I think was really helpful is when I was very conventional and I need the box and everything. He said, but Randy, you need those things, and here's the outline so you have it. but you're also artistic. And that was another part of my abilities, was conventional, but next was artistic. And that, the singing and all that kind of comes from that place. But within this box of teaching, you can also be creative, tell your own stories, and not do Jay's version, do your version.
Yeah.
But I kind of know where I'm going, with the outline broadly, but I can take some liberties with it. And that really it resonated a lot with me. It's like, that is me. This place profile is who I am, how God's made me. And I need to step into that and not like sort of look, trying to be somebody else as I teach it. I'm going to be who I am. And when you sort of just called that out for me and sort of, hey, here's who you are, now teach that way. Yeah. And I was like, that makes so much sense. And I'm more comfortable doing that. Yeah. So, yeah.
I actually want to get on video. I want to get the China story. We won't do it tonight, but I want that on video. Yeah. Because I want to be able to use it and just say, let me show you a really powerful story about an experience. So, but I've loved, as I've sat with you through the years, listening to your stories. And like, you may know, he always tells a story about y'all going on vacation and you wanting to go, was it Paris?
It was when we went to Europe.
Oh.
Yeah. He always, but I love, he's got some good stories now when he does teach it, even about the family and all that. So, but that's a little bit of how you stepped into that role of going through place, still sing, still teach, both of y'all are with the college students now and been, but haven't always been with college students. So Mary, what's our next question that we've diverted, as I said, but you've got some questions and I want you to talk about your relationship some with Charity.
One of the things that I loved as y'all were sharing that story, because you stepped into the same role, but you emphasized how you did it differently according to how you're wired. Dad, you have the gift of leadership and hospitality. You're a D personality. You have the gift of teaching and evangelism with the C personality. You're both artistic, but you're much more conventional than my dad is. I can speak from experience.
Even this episode is not real.
I can speak from experience because I'm also very conventional in my abilities, but y'all are speaking about the same role, but how you fulfilled it was in line with how you're wired and how you're gifted. So you're fulfilling a role. You're both very effective at that role that you were fulfilling, but it was in line with who you were. And even as you were sitting down with Dad in that coaching session, what you saw didn't put you in a box. It didn't limit you, but Dad saw that there was a passion there, and he helped you see how you can fulfill that passion in light of how you're wired and step into a role that you're passionate about, not in the same way he does it, but in the way that you would do it because of how you're wired and how you're gifted. And you might, Charity, have a similar story to that because of the role that I know you've been in for a long time, the role that you played in my life. But tell us a little bit from your perspective and your experience, what you learned from going through Place and maybe some of the roles that you stepped into after that and how you fulfilled those roles.
Okay. I just want to say really quick, one of the things that Place did, it kind of popped in my mind, and I remembered this thought. When we first took Place, and he was so passionate about it, I was just very excited to see what God had in store. But it really did change our lives because it gave him a place where he could grow spiritually as our leader of our home. Not that he wasn't, but I remember being so thankful because he became stronger and confident, and he just grew. And I will never forget just thanking Jesus for not that I was the leader, but he found his place. And it really changed us in our relationship, just our love for Jesus and how we could encourage one another. And so I'm forever grateful for Place in that sense.
And it still, I can see in your eye, it still has a tenderness in your heart for that.
We were raised in church. We know Jesus. We love Jesus. We served him. But when you find that you have a place and you get passionate about it, it's next level. God can do so many great things. And I've watched God use him so many times. He really has a gift of teaching, and he's so passionate, and it's such an encouragement to me. So that was the side note. I wanted to make sure I share that because sometimes I forget things. As far as me, I did children's choir. I worked with the kids, loved it because I sing. So, I served there. But when I took place, my gifts were hospitality and mercy. And I really had a passion for youth. And so I decided I'm going to go over to the youth, and because we had been teaching a class when he got really encouraged, and I decided I really wanted to be with the kids. I felt like that was where my heart was being pulled, but I was just like, I'm not really sure. And God found where to plug me in as a leader, and I was able to connect with kids in a different way. Maybe not all teachers can. And God used those gifts and highlighted them, and he still is to this day. I mean, I'm telling you, God shows himself every time and confirms, you just keep following me, use your spiritual gifts that I've given you, and I will continue to bless you and bless others. And so it's not about me, it's what he's given me and how I use it for him. And so I think being with the youth was one of the highlights of my life, pouring into kids and hoping and praying that somehow I can make a difference in their lives and it'll stick. And then seeing the fruits after. And you're obviously one of them, Mary. And it's such a joy. And I would have never, before I took place, I would have never thought that I could ever be a youth teacher, leader. I just thought, I'm not equipped. I am not like a Bible scholar. I'm not a teacher, but I do love kids and I do care about what they're going through. And I feel like I feel what they're feeling. And so I just felt like, okay, this is what God has given me and I'm going to walk into this. And yeah, I mean, that's all I could really say is I would have never done it if I had not taken place. Mm-hmm. And I know that for a fact. And I look back at my life and I just continue to say, like, God had me where he wanted me. So, but I had to walk in faith to get there. So I think I answered your question. I'm not sure.
You did. What I love about both of y'all's answers, and as we could hear you talking about it, and if people are watching the video version of this, I'm sure they can see it too, is the passion with which both of y'all spoke about the roles that you stepped into. And both of y'all stepped into a quote unquote teaching role, mm-hmm. but it was a reflection of your passions. Your passions drove you to a certain place, to either a position as a teacher or as a place facilitator, in your position as a youth leader, as a quote Sunday school teacher, mm-hmm. but only one of y'all had the gift of teaching. Right. But the way that you fulfilled the role of a Sunday school teacher was through the gifts that you had. And that's what made you so effective. And just to fill everybody in, you told them how you first met them and your memories of them. You were my Sunday school teacher, mentor, whatever you want to call it.
Still is your mentor.
Still would be a mentor.
I would say friend.
You still get lots of phone calls from me throughout the year.
Yeah.
And every time me and Hannah's one of my best friends. She's been on the podcast before.
We love Hannah.
But every time we were home from break in college, we would get dinner or coffee with you and Sarah. Yeah. But I vividly remember even talking about the impact that you can make because you followed your passion and you were effective in using your gifts. When I was in middle school and high school, I was really busy playing sports all the time with volleyball and basketball. I didn't make it to Wednesday nights a lot of times. I didn't have a lot of time that I could spare when I was in season, which is pretty much the whole year. And so I never really felt connected with the youth group, which my dad was on staff and one of my best friends was there all the time. And yet I still didn't really feel like that was my place and that I had a really strong community there. And I watched a lot of other people who were at that church have incredible communities through that youth group. And I just didn't have the time to put in to really reap that because I didn't have time to sow there. And I just never really felt connected. And it wasn't until you and Sarah became our leaders junior year And I think using that gift of hospitality of mercy, of making people feel seen, of welcoming us, creating an environment where we all felt seen, where we felt wanted, where you stepped into whatever we were going through in our life, where both of y'all opened your home to us. We would have sleepovers and movie nights. And I always tell this story with talking about y'all, but I vividly remember my junior year. I was right in the middle of basketball season, and everyone knew if I was in season, if I made it on Sunday, that was what we were hoping for that week. But we had just played in a Final Four game down in Macon. We drove back, and you or Sarah or Hannah called me that night because Hannah had my location. And she said, "Are you already home?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "We haven't started the movie yet. You have to come over to Charity's house. Everyone's here." Y'all were having a sleepover that night. And that night, there was nothing crazy or special about that night other than the fact that I was wanted and y'all gave us a place to feel seen and to feel welcome. And the fact that in season, when I didn't have a lot of time, that was something that I wanted to do, that was a place that I wanted to go and wanted to be, really stood out to me because that wasn't the norm. And that stood out from a lot of other times in my life, a lot of other seasons. And those 2 years were so special to all of us. Wow. And you're still obviously an important part of my life and leaving an impact. And as a Sunday school teacher, that was the role that was the position you were in, but the way you fulfilled that role was through your gift. And I think our relationship is evidence of how effective you were and how much of an impact it made on my life. And so that can be an encouragement for you.
I'm encouraged.
An encouragement to all of y'all that if someone has a passion for a group of people or a subject, that if you fulfill that passion, the Lord will equip you to what he's calling you to, and you'll fulfill the role in the way that he's gifted you to be able to pursue the passions that he's laid on your heart. Yeah. And y'all are evidence of that.
That's sweet. I was going to just share one thing kind of along those lines. I shared this story when I teach place, but we had just taken place. So back, 20 years ago, and somebody approached Charity to say, "Hey, we need a VBS." VBS was about to start. We need a VBS teacher for the second graders or whatever. And will you be a teacher for the VBS? And Charity was like, I don't know. Let me think about it. And then they said, "Well, just pray about it," which automatically like, oh man, there's the guilt trip I need now. So then she comes home. And she was telling me this interaction, and she goes, "But I'm not a teacher." And so she starts crying, and she was very emotional. She's, "But I want to serve in VBS and help the kids. I love the kids, but I'm not a teacher, so I don't think I can do that." And we had just taken place. I said, "Charity,
I remember.
Maybe there's another place you can serve in VBS. You can still work in VBS, but maybe not a teacher. Maybe you can just work with the kids, and I'm sure they'll be open to having you work in that capacity." So the next Sunday, she went to the person that asked her and said, "I don't really want to teach, but can I just be a helper or be in the room and with the gift of hospitality and mercy?" And they said, "Oh yeah, sure. We'd love that. We need helpers too." And so it was just another reminder that you can use your gifts, personality that you've been given in a lot of capacities, and don't have to really step into the teacher role or the whatever specific thing is. God can use you in so many different ways. And so you don't feel hindered by, "Oh, I'm not that person on the stage," or "I'm not the pastor," or "I'm not on staff, and God will really use me when I can get to that level." No way. God can use you right now, right where you are, with the gifts you've been given, because he created you that way. And you're part of the body of Christ, and we're all part of the body of Christ, and we have a place to play in the body. And so when you're connected to a church, you're there for a reason, to be used how God has made you and equipped you to be there. And so that was just a great moment of realization, I think, when that happened for me too. And I think that probably carried on just for building confidence in, okay, this might not be the area, but this is. And place kind of gives us the filter for recognizing, okay, here's what I'm good at, or here's what I'm not so good at. So I'm going to kind of follow or filter things that may come up through that lens of place, my profile that I kind of know. And I don't think that's going to fit, but this would, and I can still serve in the same way and serve toward the same group of people.
It definitely helps you. I don't want to say this, but it helps you say no when you assess a situation. It helps you to say no and understand why you're saying no, and you can actually articulate that to the person as to why.
So you can know what your yes is.
Yes. It really makes a difference. I mean, that's all I can say is it makes it much more clear.
I love even the word choice that you use, that it's a filter and a lens so that you can evaluate and articulate, this is my no and this is why.
Mhm.
And I don't have to feel guilty about
Right.
giving my no. But y'all haven't just spoke about what you gave your no's to. Our whole conversation has been how it helped you give your yes and how you
Mhm.
gave it so confidently. And y'all can look in hindsight as to why that yes worked out and how the Lord was leading that yes and the fruit that has come out of the yeses you've given.
Right.
And that word choice is one of the ways that I always look at it. It's a lens and a filter for you to evaluate and let your yes be yes and let your no be no.
Yes.
So that you can fulfill and pursue those passions that the Lord has laid on your heart and be
Right.
confident and not feel bad about giving your no because you're that much more confident about why and where you're giving your yeses.
Right.
Yes, that's
Mhm.
good. Yeah.
Even as I think about, we're going to title what this episode is, it could go in so many different directions. It could go in obviously place and finding your place and walking through that journey. It could go through the power of longevity of being in the, because we have been in church together for over 20 years.
Right.
It could go to a dad's gratefulness forever and ever and ever for what you poured into this kid of mine.
Praise God.
And it could go into, Randy, you're also a deacon at our church, and y'all live pretty close to the church. And how many nights as you know, it normally ends at about 7:30 and Randy comes in at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
Well, he's in the parking lot talking to me.
That's okay. We love
And
it.
it goes to just the relationships
Mhm.
of doing life. Yeah, the common thing that brought us together was the desire to figure out how God created us so we can do what God created us to do.
Right.
But boy, we've had a lot of life with each other
Yes.
for a lot of years that wasn't just about fulfilling a role at a church, but really, hopefully, fulfilling the roles in each other's lives that help us be encouraged, that help us be able to walk alongside a dad with his kid. And we have a video that you guys did at our church that we have used it all over the country. And every time Mary and I do these 2-day trainings, that video comes up and I choke up every time.
Wow.
Because of the gratitude that I will always, always, always have for you.
Wow.
And what you meant to my kid.
Wow. Praise God. And the funny thing is, I didn't know I was making any impact. Honestly, we were just doing life together, but God used that. And I'm just so thankful. I mean, hearing it, like, it just is such an encouragement to me. So, yeah, I'm so thankful for you.
Well, let me speak to just a place of gratefulness too. I mean, place has been now I'm doing it, just an impact on our life. As she said, like, I mean, 20 years is a long time. 20 years. And we've been serving together. And I don't know where I'd been, Jay, had it not been for place.
I agree.
I mean, we could have served and we probably would have figured out some version of spiritual gifts, I hope, but it wouldn't have been as clear, I don't think. And I'm glad we learned it when we did. And I'm glad how it even came about, and even the years maybe we didn't know so much, because it gave me such passion when I did learn. It's like, okay, I got to tell other people about this. This is amazing. And I've found that when I've taught place, there's a lot of people in my shoes
Yes.
that have never heard of it, or like we'll ask them, it's day one class. Why are you taking this class? What do you want to get out of this? What's your objective? And everybody will say, I just want to find out what my spiritual gifts are. I just want to learn, or how I can serve in this church. And that is my answer. That was my answer when I took this 20 years ago. And that's why I do it, because I can remember myself 20 years ago wanting to know, I'm singing, is that enough? Or am I doing the right thing? I had all these questions. And place was so organized and so well laid out that it just connected a lot of the dots for us and allowed us just to plug in and then feel confident. God's placed us here. Now we can serve out of his gifting that he's given to us, and just know that we're walking in God's will by serving him. God's got this whole thing rigged. I mean, he gave us the gifts to serve him with. And it's like we always ask the question, what's God's will for my life? That's just, everyone has, the youth love that. That's a good question. Well, the God's will for your life is to do the next thing that is in front of you to do, then be obedient to. And what he's told us to do is to serve him and to walk in obedience in serving him. And how do we serve him? Place tells you exactly how, your gifts and where, your passions, and all of that stuff comes together. And when someone realizes that, even in class, when we were teaching, you will see the light bulbs go off in people when we start going through it. And people recognize, wait a minute, I can see maybe I've already done this, or I already served in this way, or had this certain spiritual gift a couple years ago. And now they're just realizing what they call it, and so I already had this gift or whatever. But I'm so thankful for this, for place. It changed the trajectory of our life. And here we are 20 years later. So,
and one of the things that I love about you and I with Place is you teach the college, and it was about 1.5 years ago, you were taking the college students through. Yes. And because sometimes on Sundays you have to sing up front and you come in a little bit late.
Yeah.
You and I can fill in for you, and you can walk in on point number 2 and you can pick up on point number 3, and we don't miss a beat. And we've done that several times.
We've done that a few times, yeah.
Where I've actually filled in, or you've come in. And I remember a few years ago, I got the opportunity to go to the World Series with one of my little baseball players' teams that he was with. And I think I called you on Thursday night and said, hey, can you be there tomorrow night for me? I got a chance to go to the World Series with a baseball team.
Yeah.
But we've had a really cool relationship.
Yeah. Yep.
So as we get to the end, I don't know if we answered your questions, but we said that this would go really fast, didn't we?
We did. And it's not about answering questions. It was really about sharing y'all's story with people. And I felt encouraged just by listening to y'all. And I think your heart for the Lord and for serving him is so evident, and your passion for serving him is still so fresh as it was 20 years ago when you first discovered it, and your heart was set on fire for this new thing that you've discovered that the Lord gave you. And the fact that 20 years later you still talk about it with such passion is additional evidence of when you're serving in the ways that the Lord has gifted you. I think when it says in Timothy to fan into flame the gift of God that is in you, to keep up a flame, you have to fan it continually, but there's evidence of that flame still ablaze in your hearts because of the way in which you speak about it. And I just think that is so beautiful. I was encouraged by it. I hope everyone listening was. And I just want to thank y'all again for coming in and sharing your story with people, and sharing how it's not just Place that made an impact in your life, but it was the gifts that the Lord gave you made an impact in your life, and Place was the tool and what facilitated the discovery of those gifts that the Lord gave you, and that you have been responsible stewards of. You've been the servants that have used those talents that the Lord has given you. And 20 years later, you can attest to the way that you've stewarded the gifts that the Lord gave you, the way that you fan them into flame, and even evidence of the effectiveness of those gifts in other people's lives. So thank you all so much again for coming in. And thank you all for tuning in. We hope you were encouraged by this episode. If you were, make sure you share it with your friends and make sure to tune in next time.